All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and today I'm going to give you my best decks for the ranked battles to wrap up and end this B3B everyday. Is it every wonder season? It is, right? Everyday wonders. We're going to wrap up this season, and I'm going to give you guys what decks I believe are the best decks to play. Now, what we're going to do a little differently in today's video is talk about these decks in the context of moving forward and next season, since the teaser and some of the cards for B4 Ruler of the Skies has been showcased. We made a video talking about all those cards yesterday. We have sort of this idea a little bit of what the metagame might begin to look like, and I'm going to use the context of those new cards to talk about these deck lists kind of also moving forward, right? And a lot of these decks are pretty much the decks that we've seen over the last few weeks, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about them, and that to me is a pretty good way to fill the space in a video like this today. But these are going to be my top recommendations to finish off this ranked season. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and go check out yesterday's video if you haven't already. The other cool thing is that the Pocket Mads website is releasing soon, and that's going to have a lot of really great data tools available, and I'm actually going to be using it today over here on the side to talk about the relative data given a smaller time frame, right? And that's the big upside to the website here, or one of the big upsides to this website that we have coming out, is we're able to see the metagame data not just for the entire season or for a single tournament, but we're able actually to look at things over a 3-day span, 7-day span, or 14-day span. So that's what we're doing today. I'm taking a look at the data just over the last couple of days, and that should provide the most relevant, the most accurate data to judge things on. It's an advantage. I got that specific advantage right now, but you guys will as well in just a little bit when the website launches. But anyway, let's get right into it. The first deck is going to be Sceptile. So Sceptile this week has been the fourth most played deck, and I think that Sceptile has pretty confidently found its way in as like a top 5 deck this season. It is more popular than the Blaziken Greninja version, and unfortunately, all of the other versions of Sceptile just didn't stick around nearly as much as Greninja Blaziken or Greninja Sceptile did. So, when it comes to fire, when it comes to grass, like really these Juliana Greninja Stage 2 rare candy decks are the way that you're supposed to be playing them, or should be playing them right now when it comes to meta viability. And this is a deck that I actually feel quite good about on the ranked ladder. I think this is just going to be quite a strong option. And I think it's settled in that 4th, 5th, 6th best deck slot. And it's had a respectable win rate just in the past week, and about 4.5% of the meta share. And this is a choice that I'm going to feel pretty good about. I don't think its viability has gone up tremendously or down tremendously throughout the season. It's really kind of fiddling into that like high middle A tier spot, and it's a deck that I really would recommend, especially to wrap up this ranked season. But let's quickly talk about the Juliana Greninja rare candy core that we do see with Mega Sceptile and Mega Blaziken, because we did get a couple of new Stage 2 Megas announced in the B4 trailer, Ruler of the Skies, that being Gallade and Metagross. Now, the difference between Gallade and Metagross, or the difference between those and Blaziken and Sceptile, is that they have colorless energy in their attack cost, Metagross and Gallade do, but they have a total of 3 energies in their attack cost. And this is something that I think could have some potential here. Because I think that especially Gallade could definitely be slotted in a deck like this in place of Sceptile, and then you could also slot something in for Wally, right? So all of a sudden you're playing Wally, which will be able to attach a colorless energy to Greninja, and of course to Gallade to kind of accelerate the deck a little bit. Not only that, but you could just play dual energies. Gallade only has 1 fighting energy in its attack cost, so you could easily play a deck that runs fighting and water energies, and then Wally's generating colorless energies, and then you could utilize Greninja and Gallade as an attacking option. Gallade is a bit of a stronger attacker compared to Sceptile and Blaziken in terms of total damage output, so it is interesting. And you could still play Juliana. It's just something that I had like food for thought. I think you could do also the same thing for Metagross, but you're probably going to want to play like Metal Energy specifically with Metagross. That way you can maximize the damage output of the new Metagross EX, Mega Metagross. But that's just something that I thought of, right? So the Greninja Juliana rare candy core that we see with Sceptile, that we see with Blaziken, the 2 top Stage 2 Mega Pokemon in the game right now, maybe you could see them with some of these new Stage 2 Megas, namely Gallade. It's just something that I was kind of thinking about a little bit. Anyway, shout out to Sceptile, definitely still a strong deck, and honestly, I don't know. They haven't really announced anything new or special for the grass typing. I don't know if we will, because grass already has so much more support, but maybe some of the new cards that come out could be paired with Sceptile or any of the other grass Pokemon. It's just something to consider. Decidueye is another really interesting card with Wally, right? So there's a lot of potential all over the place here with Wally. But yeah, that was just sort of quickly one of my thoughts. But next up is going to be Sleep Altaria. And, you know, I will say Bad Dreams Sleep Altaria is definitely probably a top 5 deck at this point at the end of the season. But you got to keep in mind that it's not anywhere close to like top 3 or top 2. So I think that Sleep Altaria, at least in the tournament metagame, has really found its spot as like, you know, the 5th or 6th most played and most dominant deck. Its win rate's been very respectable, but again, I don't think this is a deck that can ever become more popular than like the 1st or 2nd most played deck in the metagame, because if it becomes too popular, then, you know, there's a lot of opportunities to just hard counter Sleep. And the only way that this deck's really going to find a place in the metagame is by being pretty popular, but not too popular to where everyone starts playing Sleep counters and the win rate for this deck becomes absolutely abysmal, which we did see, right? It got a little bit too big for its britches there for quite some time, and I think at this point, settling in at that 5th to 6th most dominant deck of the current metagame is probably the correct spot for a deck like this, which is strong, but has a lot of really hard, significant counterplay available to it. Now, as we all know, Igglybuff, Darkrai, Bad Dreams can be paired in a lot of different decks. And it kind of scares me, you know, once we get into the next season, once Ruler of the Skies drops, we're going to get all of these new cards. Everyone will be testing these new Pokemon with Bad Dreams, Darkrai. It's one of the few things that you can kind of bet on that people are going to be trying out. And there's a couple of prospects that do scare me. One of the things that's been floating around recently is the Dedenne EX Bad Dreams deck, which is actually a very strong deck list. And I looked at that and I thought, you know, like we could easily just slot in Mega Rayquaza in place of Dedenne. So you would just play Mega Rayquaza with Igglybuff Darkrai. And kind of crazy, right? So you have the Bad Dream stuff, you know, on the front line, dealing damage, putting pressure on your opponent. And then on the back end, you're just piling up the energies on Mega Rayquaza so it can come in and just dominate. Now, that really only gives you like one good attack with Mega Rayquaza, so it's a bit different than Dedenne, but maybe that's enough to win games. It's definitely kind of a terrifying prospect. So don't be surprised if you see any of these new Pokemon seeing play with Igglybuff Darkrai. Mega Rayquaza might be the main suspect for that. We'll really just have to wait and see. But I find that to be a bit terrifying. But yeah, Altaria, Darkrai, it is kind of the main way that people are playing Bad Dreams Darkrai. Again, probably the 5th or 6th most played deck right now for sure, but probably the 5th best deck in the metagame right now. For ranked, it's a bit different. You know what I mean? Like if you're playing a bunch of people that are playing Sleep, then maybe you just sort of decide to play Sleep counterplay. And if you're playing a bunch of Sleep counterplay decks, then maybe just don't play Sleep. You know what I mean? It's a weird thing. Ranked is definitely a bit different. Sleep is like kind of the number one example where things might be a little bit different from a play rate and a popularity perspective compared to tournament metagame, right? Because people are a little bit more apt to counterplay specific decks if they're dominating in tournament play, whereas in ranked, like people don't really, they don't necessarily kind of analyze and change you know, their decisions based around the decks that they're hitting. But it's something that I would recommend. Probably a lot of Sleep and Sleep counter on the ranked ladder, but it's still a strong deck, so had to recommend it. Next up is going to be Dark Greninja, guys. That's right. You know, Dark Greninja this week, for an example, was the 3rd most played deck this week, which is crazy to me. It did get back-to-back first place finishes at the PMPT tournaments, and maybe it will win our invitational season 3 invitational tournament this weekend. Maybe. I mean, I don't know if I'd be surprised by that. I probably would be, in fact. But yeah, it's continuing to be one of the more popular decks this season. Probably sitting around that 3rd or 4th spot throughout this entire season. It's 5% of the meta share over the last couple of days here, over the last 7 days. Its win rate hasn't been phenomenal, and it never is. And people on the ranked ladder, or people in general, like to say that you know, a lot of Dark Greninja players maybe aren't experienced or they're not optimal, and Dark Greninja does in fact reward kind of, you know, better playing and more, you know, I guess skilled players. But that to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the win rate argument for the tournament play, because most people playing in tournaments, especially playing Dark Greninja in tournaments, are probably pretty experienced with the game. So it's a weird argument. This is a deck that, again, can be really strong, and the data is pointing to it being one of the top options, especially for ranked, but it's definitely hit or miss. There's people that just can't win with this deck or find it to just not feel very strong, and then there's some people that just go on really good win streaks with it. It is a deck that I like, mostly because of Chingling, and I do like Chingling a lot. But yet again, guys, this is another thing to consider, right? Greninja and Chingling, right? So that's an additional core that we could see in a variety of other decks, right? So Greninja Chingling has seen play in a lot of different decks, but this season it's really only seeing play with these sort of basic dark mega decks, which is interesting. Like, you can attach to Darkrai, you can put double pressure on the active. It's strange to me. It's a little bit strange. Like Chingling slows the game down. You can set up Greninja, and then you can bring in like a Pokemon like Darkrai or Mega Absol after the fact, and you kind of go from there. It's a deck that to me really shouldn't seem that strong, but it in fact is. And another deck that, you know, could be something that pairs with like Mega Rayquaza or something. Like it's an interesting thing. Like I just don't know if Greninja Chingling is something that will be that optimal next season or for some of the new cards. I guess we're gonna have to just wait and see. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be a translatable, you know, core engine. Chingling Greninja seems really strong, but I just don't know if it's worth playing over other things other than, I guess, maybe if you're playing Absol and Sableye or Darkrai. Either way, definitely a strong deck, but it's not the best dark type deck right now in recent times this season, because that's going to be Zoroark. And, you know, Zoroark EX is one of the best decks in the entire game. From a win rate perspective, it's #1 this week. So it had the highest average win rate out of any of the decks that anyone played. It was only about 3% of the total meta share. It was about tied with Hydreigon this week in terms of play rate. So people are definitely trying to play a little bit more Hydreigon. Its win rate has been a lot higher, though. And this, to me, is a deck list that I think is pretty well positioned into the greater scope of the metagame. When you take a look at all of the other top decks and the decks that people are playing, you know, Zoroark ends up feeling really, really strong. It's just well positioned, right? I like this a lot. I think Dark is definitely a top type in Pokemon Pocket right now. There's a lot of different Dark type decks. But yeah, for reference, over the last 7 days in tournament play, you know, Zoroark has had a higher win rate than Suicune, then Miraidon Magnezone, then Sleep Altaria, then Sceptile, then Hydreigon, then Lucario. Like, it's literally the #1 deck from a win rate perspective over the last 7 days when it comes to online tournament data. And I find that to be quite interesting. And probably a deck that throughout this entire season was probably a top tier pick for ranked battles. It's something that I haven't played this season, but I know a lot of people have and have been very successful with it. It's probably just one of the more consistent decks in the game. And it really goes back to a particular type of deck in Pokemon Pocket that I think is very valuable, especially in ranked, which are fast-paced decks that are not only aggressive, but consistent. And Zoroark is, you know, a great example of a deck that is both fast-paced and consistent. Now, the downside to this is that none of these Pokemon have a ton of HP or deal a ton of damage. Like, that's the inherent downside. So into some archetypes, into some strategies, you're not going to do very well, but those decks that you would not be doing well into are not very popular right now, and I find that to be very interesting. Mega Manectric is another example of that, which I think probably is also a really strong deck in the metagame, but also Suicune. I think Suicune these days is incredibly fast-paced, and honestly feels quite similar to Zoroark, where like on turn 2, you just start doing your thing, and then your backline is pretty easy to set up and also quite strong. Yeah, I find those to be two very similar decks. But yeah, Zoroark is the #1 deck this week from a win rate perspective, so I had to recommend it. And for ranked, it's definitely something that I would choose to play if I were to try to go for like a top ranked seed, which I don't, and I haven't for a little while just because of time reasons. But yeah, if I was going to play 1,000 games of ranked this season, you know, Zoroark would probably be something that I would play a lot of for sure. And the next thing that I would definitely play a lot of is Suicune. That's right, guys. It's Suicune. I think Suicune's still really strong. The question with B4 releasing and everything coming up here in Pokemon Pocket is how will that affect Suicune's legacy, right? Will Suicune continue to be a top dog? If I had to guess, the answer would be yes. I just don't know if we're going to see something that can come in and be exceptionally strong into a deck like this. It's a deck that is so unique. And I think, again, one of the reasons why Zoroark is good because it's a 2-prize Pokemon, but it's incredibly fast-paced and it's very aggressive and it's very consistent. Suicune is kind of the same deal, right? Like, you got to KO 2 Pokemon in this deck. And between Giant Cape, 140 HP Suicune, like, you're just not really going to 1-hit KO it anyway. And if you do, it'll be on, like, turn 3 or turn 4. And by then, like, we're already set up, done a ton of damage, drawn through our deck, and now we have Qianpao to target the bench. And that's the concept for Suicune. It is the second most played deck this week in Pokemon Pocket, but keep in mind, it's also the second highest win rate deck. So, you know, if you're factoring in the larger sample size for, you know, Suicune, even though the win rate is a little bit lower than Zoroark, it might be the #1 deck this week, right? Just in total scope, because it's popular and it's successful. Suicune was something I put in S tier at the beginning of the season, and I still feel rather very confident that it is honestly like a top tier S tier strategy. And it's very much on its own, right? I mean, Baxcalibur, Qianpao, Suicune, these 3 cards you just kind of throw them together. And like, yes, you can play Suicune in other decks, you can play Qianpao in other decks, and you could play Baxcalibur in other decks, but none of those are going to be stronger than just playing all 3 of these cards together. I really don't think we would ever get something, and it's interesting, right? Because the metagame has become so spread out that in order for a deck list to fall down in play, something would have to be so dramatic about the greater scope of the metagame or power creep in general to kind of knock this deck like Suicune off of its pedestal, right? Because sure, like we all think Suicune is like a top tier deck, but realistically, it's only less than 6% of the meta share this week, which is not that big of a deal, right? Like, so even though it is considered to be a top tier deck, even a top tier deck right now, an S tier deck is less than 6% of the total meta share. So when the metagame is so spread out like that, it's hard to get rid of a deck because, like, you know, it's not popular enough to counterplay it. And that's the reality of Pokemon Pocket right now, is that as time has gone on, we've just added more and more and more top tier decks, and nothing is really like a tier 0 or even close, right? Suicune to me, definitely a top 3 deck, and it is a top 3 deck in win rate and popularity. Something that when you're playing in ranked, you cannot go wrong playing Suicune and Qianpao. I think it really is just a super, super strong deck, and I think it'll continue to be good next season. I just don't know how or what could possibly stop people from playing Suicune, honestly. Unless multiple of the most popular decks are strong into Suicune, that's the only way I could really see this deck falling out of favor. But anyway, next up is Miraidon Magnezone, which at this point, guys, is literally lightning type Suicune. This is something that is popular. In fact, this week it was the most played deck, and it is a top 3. It's almost tied for Suicune in terms of win rate this week. So a little bit lower than Suicune, but a little bit more popular. It's actually 7.5% of the total play rate of this week in online tournaments. So technically the most popular deck at only 7.5% of the meta, which is crazy, but definitely one of the most successful decks. So again, going into this week, or coming out of this week rather, and finishing off the season, the 3 that I feel the most confident about, just looking at the data alone, is Suicune, Miraidon, and Zoroark. Like, those 3 decks to me are like top tier decks, which is funny because they're not mega decks. But the way that the Pokemon Pocket has formulated itself right now is that the best decks are in fact 2 prize Pokemon decks, because that's the math just sort of works out, right? It's really hard for a mega Pokemon to provide more value than 2 extremely strong 2 prize EX Pokemon like Suicune, like Zoroark, like Darkrai, like Miraidon, right? And that's just the reality of Pokemon Pocket, is that some of these 2 prize EX Pokemon are just too strong. They're just too good, right? Like, you're not going to be able to make a mega Pokemon that is better than 2 Suicune. It's just not going to work. Same with Miraidon, you know? So it's just a weird place to be in right now. I do think certain mega decks are incredibly strong, but they have to have the right package and the right core and engine behind them to really prop them up. Whereas some of these Pokemon are just good. They're just really good. Miraidon's incredible. Suicune's incredible. Zoroark is really, really good as well. So the inherent nature of them being 2 prize Pokemon means to me that they will continue to be relevant, honestly. And Miraidon's a relatively new card as well. It just has everything going for it, unfortunately, with Magnezone, with Zeraora, with Clemont, with Lycia, with Professor Turo. It's just incredible. I mean, it's up there as one of the better Pokemon cards that we've ever had, just because it has access to so many strong things. But you could say the same thing about Suicune. You know, you really could. You have Qianpao, you have Baxcalibur, you have Boat. Like, you know, Miraidon's got its team here. Suicune's got its team. And honestly, Zoroark has its team as well. And those are like the top 3 decks, at least right now, if I had to pick some. And that's because they are pretty complete holistic archetypes, right? When you take a look at the other decks, they kind of are just sort of piecemeal, right? It's like, let me just slap Greninja with a stage 2 Pokemon, or let me just play, you know, Igglybuff Darkrai with some random Mega. Like, they don't really feel complete. And these 3 top decks right now feel complete. They feel like they've been designed to all kind of play together, go together seamlessly, and they're incredibly strong. And that's kind of how I feel. Magnezone Miraidon should be good going into next season. The upside to this deck is that it can start to slot in Oricorio if Oricorio becomes relevant. So that's a big upside here. But yeah, just inherently incredibly strong, you know? I think Miraidon specifically is really strong because you have the potential to take KOs, right? Because it has reach, it's got pace, it's got consistency, it can deal a ton of damage. You can one-hit KO Megas. Like, Miraidon is terrifying, and it is probably going to continue to be one of the best decks in the entire game. I just don't really see how it would not be. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that this and Suicune are just so kind of above everything else. But anyway, let's get into the weekly wildcard, guys, which I included this week because it did get first place. I believe it went 7-0 at a tournament today, and I saw it and I said, you know what? That's what weekly wildcards are really all about. Finishing off the ranked season, here is a very interesting deck, and I believe this was played by Jakesoo. I believe. So shout out to Jake Su, who went 7-0 with Solgaleo Muck and 1 copy of Suicune here, right? So the concept is Alolan Muck can turn off abilities of your opponent's basic Pokemon, which is kind of crazy. It also turns off your basic Pokemon's abilities, which is kind of tough. And we are playing Suicune, so that might seem counterproductive, but Suicune draws you cards until you can get into Muck, and also you don't have to evolve the Muck if it's not going to help into your opponent's matchups, but it will definitely help with things like Miraidon, opposing Suicunes, or Oricorio. There's a lot of examples where Muck is extremely useful. Tons of basic Pokemon have broken abilities. Like, the list goes on and on and on. Darkrai is an example. Like, you can comment down below. There's a million basic Pokemon with broken abilities. So the concept here is we have Solgaleo, and that's kind of our main attacking option. And the reason why you play Solgaleo in this deck is because you can use Rising Road to get things like Muck and Suicune out of the active spot without worrying about retreating, right? So that's the general concept. Suicune draws you cards, it takes damage. Muck can just sort of sit in the active for a turn or two, you know, get set up, turn off the abilities, and then you just bring in Solgaleo for free, and you just start hitting. We get access to Metal Core Barrier and Lily to keep it alive for quite some time. And again, it is a 2-prize Pokemon, which in the current metagame is a pretty big benefit. Again, a really unique deck. Solgaleo Muck has been a kind of a fringe meta deck for quite some time. And again, you know, I think it was Jake Su who went 7-0 at a tournament. So I was like, I gotta include it. I gotta talk about it in today's video because I love it. I love it when stuff like that happens. So shout out to Solgaleo. I don't know if it'll be, I mean, we're going to have to just wait and see. It's a really unique Pokemon. Like, Solgaleo is like its own guy. And then I think the Rising Road ability will continue to be relevant moving forward. Like, just depending on whether you get some really strong Pokemon that do have high retreat costs that you don't want in the active, play it with Solgaleo, right? It really is that #1 example right now. So there you go. Solgaleo and Alolan Muck. Pretty crazy. Honestly, what a cool deck. So that's the weekly wild card. There we go. Anyway, so yes, the ranked season is wrapping up in a couple of days. These are the decks that I would play to finish off the ranked season. Once we get into next week, right? Because going into next week is when the new set releases. So we're going to do some preemptive deck lists. We're going to do some meta analysis. The Invitational Tournament, which is the final send-off of the B3B season, is going to be this weekend. We'll cover it on Monday. We will do a meta report, but from Tuesday and Wednesday, and I believe the new set will release on Thursday, we're going to do some early preemptive planning. We're going to talk about some early deck lists, some theory crafting, maybe if, you know, some leaks come out or if the set list drops, we'll talk about all of the cards like that. But just, you're going to want to stay tuned because next week there's going to be a ton of stuff that happens. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous. It's going to be the craziest week in a long time in Pokemon Pocket, so I'm really excited for it. But anyway, let's wrap this up here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace out, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you guys next time. And yeah. Bye.